Humans Dread Conflict, Part 1. The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord was filled with beings from 200 different worlds. Some had scales that shimmered like oil on water. Others floated in anti-gravity pods, their bodies too delicate for normal air. A few were made of living crystal, and their voices sounded like wind chimes when they spoke. Ambassador of the Dominion walked to the center podium. He was tall and thin, with 4 arms and eyes that could see in complete darkness. His people were ancient. They had traveled between stars when humans were still living in caves. "Fellow members of the Concord," he began, his translator device turning his clicking sounds into words everyone could understand. "I come before you today to discuss the human question." A low murmur spread through the hall. The humans, always the humans. Humanity had joined the Galactic Concord only 80 years ago. In the grand scale of galactic history, this was nothing. A blink of an eye. Most species spent thousands of years proving themselves worthy of full membership. The humans were still being watched, still being studied. "My people have completed our assessment of human civilization," continued. "I will share our findings." He pressed a button and a holographic image of Earth appeared above his head. A small blue planet covered mostly in water. It looked peaceful from space, beautiful even. "The human is classified as a death world," said. "Category 7. This means it is one of the most dangerous planets capable of producing intelligent life." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Death worlds were rare. Most intelligent species evolved on gentle planets with stable climates and few predators. The fact that humans came from such a hostile environment was concerning. Their planet has extreme temperature changes, massive storms that can destroy entire cities, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, floods, and perhaps most importantly, a stunning variety of predators and diseases. Pause to let this information sink in. One would expect a species from such a world to be formidable, dangerous, perhaps even aggressive. He made a sound that his translator rendered as a chuckle, but our research shows the opposite is true. He changed the holographic display. Now it showed images of human cities, parks filled with families, schools where children learned, hospitals where the sick were healed. Humans have no natural weapons, no claws, no venomous glands, no armored plates. Their skin is soft and easily damaged. They cannot see in the dark. They cannot smell danger approaching. They are, by any reasonable measure, physically weak. Several delegates nodded. They had noticed this too. But more importantly, humans appear to be psychologically weak as well. Brought up new images, war memorials, graveyards, museums filled with old weapons behind glass cases. They are obsessed with death, with remembering their dead. Their culture is filled with warnings about the horror of violence. He played a short clip from a human film. It showed soldiers crying, families torn apart by war, cities burning. The message was clear: war is terrible. Their entertainment constantly reminds them that conflict is evil. Their leaders speak endlessly about peace. They have signed every non-aggression treaty we have offered them, every single one without negotiation. Spread all 4 of his arms wide. "Our conclusion is simple. Humans are a fearful species. They evolved on a death world, yes, but they evolved as prey, not predators. They survived by running and hiding, not by fighting. Their obsession with the horrors of war is evidence of deep cultural trauma. They dread conflict because they know they cannot win it." The hall erupted in discussion. Some delegates agreed, others seemed uncertain, but none of them stood to argue against the assessment. Far in the back of the hall, a small human delegation sat quietly. They listened to everything. They said nothing. The oldest among them, a woman named Doctor, kept her face completely still. She had worked for 40 years to build peace between humanity and the galaxy. She had smiled through insults. She had accepted unfair treaties. She had watched other species mock her people and said nothing. because she knew something did not. She knew why humans really built those memorials. 3 months later, everything changed. The hegemony was not a member of the Galactic Concord. They were an empire of warriors, a species that had conquered dozens of worlds through pure military force. The Conquered had always avoided them, hoping that ignoring the problem would make it go away. It did not go away. Supreme Commander Thrax stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at a star map. His body was massive, covered in natural armor that could stop most projectiles. His people had evolved as the ultimate predators on their world. They had never known fear. "The 442 system," he said, pointing at 3 small planets. 2 billion humans live there, rich in resources, poorly defended. His advisors nodded eagerly. "The Conquered will not help them," Thrax continued. "They never help anyone, and the humans themselves," he laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "We have read the assessment. These creatures are cowards. They will surrender or flee the moment they see our fleet." He gave the order. A message was sent to the human colonies. The ultimatum was simple: abandon the 442 system within 30 days or face complete destruction. Thrax expected panic. He expected desperate calls to the Conquered, begging for help. He expected humans to pack their belongings and run like the frightened prey animals they were. Instead, he received a response in less than 1 hour. It was only 3 words long. "Come and take." Thrax stared at the message for a long time. Then he laughed again. "Foolish creatures," he said. "They do not understand what they face. Prepare the invasion fleet." On Earth, in the chambers of the United Terran government, there was no laughter. The emergency session had been called within minutes of receiving the ultimatum. Every leader, every general, every admiral was present. But there was no panic, no screaming, no desperate arguments about what to do. Instead, there was silence, a heavy, terrible silence that seemed to fill the room like smoke. Doctor looked around at her colleagues. She saw old men and women, veterans of humanity's last great wars, conflicts that had ended centuries ago. Some of them were crying, but their tears were not from fear. They were crying because they remembered. They remembered what humanity was capable of, what humanity had done to itself, again and again, throughout its bloody history. They remembered the wars that had killed hundreds of millions, the weapons that could burn entire cities in seconds, the darkness that lived inside every human heart. And they knew that darkness was about to wake up again. General, the oldest man in the room, finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "God forgive us," he said. "Send the response and begin the awakening." Deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland, blast doors that had not opened in 200 years began to move. In the cold darkness of the cloud, ships that had been sleeping for generations received their activation signals. The humans did not ask the Conquered for help. They did not need it. Humans Dread Conflict, Part 2. Supreme Commander Thrax sat in his war room, surrounded by his most trusted advisors. Holographic displays showed everything his spies had learned about humanity. He studied the information carefully, like a hunter studying his prey. "Tell me about their military," he ordered. Admiral Vex, his chief intelligence officer, stepped forward. "Minimal, Supreme Commander. They maintain a small defense force, but it has not seen real combat in over 300 years. Their soldiers spend more time on rescue missions and disaster relief than actual fighting. Weapons? Outdated. They have some orbital defense platforms, but nothing that can challenge our fleet. Their ground forces use standard infantry equipment. No heavy armor. No planetary bombardment capability." Thrax nodded slowly. This matched everything he had expected. "What about their culture?" he asked. "Their psychology?" Another advisor spoke up. "They are deeply traumatized by their history, Supreme Commander. Their museums are filled with artifacts from ancient wars. Their schools teach children that violence is the greatest evil. Their leaders constantly speak of peace and cooperation. The advisor pulled up images on the display. Human veterans sitting in therapy sessions. Memorial services where thousands gathered to cry over soldiers who died long ago. Movies and books that always showed war as tragedy, never as glory. They have something called Memorial Day, the advisor continued. An entire day dedicated to mourning those who died in past conflicts. They do this every year. They have been doing it for centuries. Thrax leaned back in his chair. A species that spends so much time mourning its dead clearly fears death. Good. They will surrender quickly to avoid more losses. He did not notice the small flaw in his reasoning. He did not ask himself why a weak, fearful species would need so many memorials. He did not wonder what kind of wars could produce so many dead that remembering them required a national holiday. These questions never occurred to him. Far across the galaxy, humanity was preparing. In a small town in North Dakota, a man named James Walker received a message on his personal device. He was 62 years old, a retired farmer who spent his days tending to his garden and playing with his. He had not worn a uniform in 40 years. The message was simple: your service is requested. Report to Station 7. James read it 3 times. Then he walked inside his house, opened a closet he had not touched in decades, and pulled out a bag that was already packed. He had packed it 40 years ago on the day he retired. He had hoped he would never need it. He kissed his wife goodbye. He hugged his. He did not tell them where he was going. In Japan, an elderly woman named received the same message. She was a retired engineer who had spent her career designing bridges and buildings. But before that, before the peaceful years, she had designed something else. She went to her basement and unlocked a safe that had not been opened in half a century. Inside were blueprints, designs for weapons that had never been built because they were too terrible to use. She hoped they would still be too terrible to use, but she packed the blueprints anyway. Across Earth and all its colonies, similar scenes played out. Millions of ordinary people, teachers, doctors, farmers, artists, received the same message, and millions of them responded. They did not respond because they wanted war. They responded because they understood something that did not. Peace was not the natural state of humanity. Peace was a choice, a difficult daily choice that required constant work, and sometimes to protect that peace, you had to remember how to fight. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, generals stood in a command center that most humans did not know existed. The walls were lined with screens showing data from across human space. Ships were moving, factories were converting, soldiers were training. "Status report," he ordered. A young officer stepped forward. "The mothball fleets in the cloud are at 60% activation. We expect full readiness in 18 days. Ground forces are mobilizing across all colony worlds. Civilian evacuation from 442 is proceeding on schedule. They have assembled approximately 1,000 warships. Based on their acceleration, they will reach in 22 days." General nodded. The timing would be close, but it would work. "What about the conquered?" he asked. Another officer answered. "Several species have offered humanitarian assistance. They want to help evacuate our civilians." "Generous of them." "They believe we are going to lose, sir. They are already dividing up our territory in private discussions." General almost smiled. "Almost. Let them believe what they want. Continue preparations." On the flagship, Supreme Commander Thrax received his own status report. "The humans are evacuating their colonies," Admiral Vex reported. "Our scouts have detected thousands of transport ships leaving the 442 system." "Running away," Thrax said with satisfaction. "Exactly as predicted." There is something strange, Supreme Commander. The transport ships are moving toward the outer system, not toward Earth or other human territories. Thrax waved a massive hand dismissively. Perhaps they are gathering at a rally point. Perhaps they are confused. It does not matter. By the time we arrive, the system will be empty. He did not ask why the humans would evacuate toward the outer system, where there was nothing but empty space and frozen rocks. He did not wonder what might be waiting there. These questions never occurred to him. In her office on Earth, Doctor was writing a letter. Not an official communication. She had already sent the three-word response that would define this moment in history. This letter was personal. It was addressed to her granddaughter. "My dear Sophia," she wrote, "by the time you read this, you will know what your grandmother really did for 40 years. You will know that every smile, every handshake, every unfair treaty I signed was not weakness. It was hope. Hope that we would never need to show the galaxy what humanity truly is." She paused, looking out her window at the peaceful city below. Children were playing in a park. Couples were walking hand in hand. Life continued, beautiful and ordinary. "I want you to understand something," she continued writing. We do not hate anyone. That is not why we will fight. We will fight because some things must be protected. Because there are 2 billion innocent people on those colony worlds who deserve to live in peace. Because if we do not stop the here, they will never stop. She put down her pen and picked up an old photograph. It showed a young man in a military uniform standing in front of a burned city. Her great-grandfather, a soldier from Earth's last World War. He had survived that war. He had spent the rest of his life teaching his children and about its horrors. He had made them promise to never forget. Had not forgotten. "I spent my life trying to prevent this," she said quietly to the photograph. "I hope you understand. I hope you forgive me." Then she turned back to her desk and began reviewing the battle plans. The humans were not running away from the evacuation ships were not filled with refugees. They were decoys, designed to make the enemy think the colonies were empty. The real civilians had been moved months ago, quietly, into deep underground bunkers that could survive anything short of a direct nuclear strike. They had food, water, medical supplies, and everything they needed to wait out a war. And in the empty space where they expected to find frightened prey, something else was gathering, something old and terrible and patient. The mothball fleets were waking up. Humanity was remembering how to fight. Humans Dread Conflict, Part 3. The fleet jumped into the 442 system like a hammer falling from the sky. 1,000 warships, each one bristling with weapons, spread across the darkness of space in perfect formation. Supreme Commander Thrax stood on his bridge, watching the display screens with hungry eyes. He expected to see human ships fleeing in terror. He expected desperate calls for mercy, offers of surrender, the sweet sound of a broken enemy begging for their lives. Instead, he saw nothing. The system was empty, no defense platforms, no fleet. The 3 colony worlds hung in space like ripe fruit waiting to be picked. Sensor sweeps showed that the cities were dark, the spaceports abandoned. "They ran," Admiral Vex said, sounding almost disappointed. "The cowards actually ran." Thrax felt a flicker of annoyance. He had wanted a battle. He had wanted to crush the humans and show the galaxy the power of the hegemony. But a victory was still a victory, even if it was boring. "Send landing parties to all 3 worlds," he ordered. "Secure the infrastructure. Find any humans who stayed behind and bring them to me for questioning." The landing ships detached from the main fleet and began their descent toward the colony worlds. Thousands of soldiers, eager for conquest, checked their weapons and prepared for a simple occupation mission. They never saw the trap. The moment the landing ships entered the atmosphere of the first colony world, the ground came alive. What had looked like empty buildings revealed hidden weapons platforms. Missile batteries that had been disguised as water towers opened fire. Anti-aircraft systems that had been buried underground erupted from the soil. The first wave of landing ships exploded before they even touched the ground. "What is happening?" Thrax roared, staring at his displays in disbelief. "We are under attack," Admiral Vex shouted. "The colonies, they were not abandoned. The humans set a trap." But that was only the beginning. Behind the fleet, in the empty space they had ignored, the darkness began to move. Ships that had been running silent, hiding their heat signatures, powered up their engines. Weapons that had been cold for centuries came online with a hungry hum. The mothball fleet had arrived. 300 human warships, each one old but deadly, emerged from their hiding places and formed a perfect attack formation. They had jumped behind the fleet while Thrax was focused on the planets. Now the hunters had become the hunted. "Enemy ships detected," an officer screamed. 300 contacts, they are everywhere." Thrax spun around, his armored body moving faster than something so large should be able to move. His eyes found the display showing the human fleet, and for the first time in his life, he felt something he did not recognize. It was fear. "All ships defensive formation," he ordered. "Prepare for combat." But it was too late. The human fleet was already firing. The Battle of 442 would be studied in military academies for 1,000 years. Historians would analyze every move, every decision, every moment of the engagement. But for the soldiers who fought in it, there was no time for analysis. There was only chaos and fire and death. The humans did not fight like any species they had ever encountered. They did not line up their ships in neat formations and exchange fire from a safe distance. They dove into the middle of the enemy fleet, accepting terrible losses to get close enough for their weapons to do maximum damage. A human destroyer, badly damaged and leaking atmosphere, accelerated directly toward a command cruiser. The crew knew they were going to die. They did not try to escape. They stayed at their posts, guiding their ship until the very end, until the collision destroyed both vessels in a bloom of nuclear fire. On the colony worlds, human ground forces emerged from their bunkers and began the counterattack. They did not have the heavy armor or advanced weapons but they had something else. They had training, they had tactics, and they had a fury that burned like the heart of a star. An officer, separated from his unit during the chaos, found himself cornered by a group of human soldiers. He raised his weapon, prepared to die fighting. But the humans did not shoot him. Instead, they shouted for him to surrender. When he refused, when he charged at them with his claws extended, they shot him in the legs and tied him up. They took him prisoner. They treated his wounds. They gave him water. He could not understand. His people did not take prisoners. Why would the humans? Above the planet, the battle continued. The fleet was larger, but the humans were smarter. They used asteroids as cover. They coordinated their attacks with impossible precision. They sacrificed ships when necessary, trading their lives for strategic advantages. Supreme Commander Thrax watched his fleet being torn apart, and finally understood his mistake. The humans did not fear war because they were weak. They feared war because they knew exactly what it meant. They had studied it. They had mastered it. They had written books about every kind of combat, developed tactics for every possible situation, created weapons for every imaginable enemy. They feared war the way a reformed killer fears violence, not because they could not do it, but because they knew exactly how good they were at it. "Retreat," Thrax finally ordered, his voice breaking. "All ships retreat." The surviving ships jumped away, leaving behind the burning wreckage of their fleet and the bodies of their dead. The Battle of 442 was over. Humanity had won. But for the human soldiers there was no celebration, no cheering, no joy. Captain Maria Santos stood in the wreckage of her ship's bridge, surrounded by the bodies of her crew. They had won. They had saved the colonies, but 60% of her people were dead. She had known most of them since they were children. She had watched them grow up, fall in love, have families of their own. Now they were gone, sacrificed for victory. She did not cry. She was too tired to cry. Instead, she began the grim work of identifying the dead and notifying their families. On the surface of the first colony world, a human medic named David knelt beside a wounded soldier. The alien was dying, his blood pooling on the ground around him. "Why?" the whispered, his translator struggling with words his species rarely used. "Why do you help me? I am your enemy." David looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death that day. "Because we hate this," he said simply. "We hate everything about this. We always have." The did not understand. He died with confusion on his face. David closed the alien's eyes and moved on to the next wounded soldier. There were so many of them, human and alike, all of them bleeding, all of them suffering. This was war. This was what humanity had tried so hard to forget. This was why they built memorials and taught their children about the horrors of violence. Not because they were cowards, not because they were weak. Because they knew, they had always known. In the command center on Earth, General received the reports from 442. Victory. Complete victory. The invasion fleet was destroyed or scattered. He should have been happy. He should have been celebrating. Instead, he sat alone in his office, reading the casualty lists. Name after name after name. Thousands of them. People who had lived peaceful lives until 3 weeks ago. People who had hoped they would never need to fight. "I am sorry," he whispered to no one. "I am so sorry." He knew this was not over. They would return. They would bring more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. The war had only begun. And humanity would have to remember more of what it had tried so hard to forget. Humans Dread Conflict, Part 4. The Galactic Concord was in chaos. 200 species filled the Great Hall, their voices rising in confusion and anger. News of the Battle of 442 had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The mighty had been defeated by the humans. The soft, weak, fearful humans. It was impossible. It was terrifying. It changed everything they thought they knew. Ambassador stood at the center of the storm, his 4 arms waving as he tried to restore order. His species had written the intelligence report that called humans cowards. His species had told the galaxy that humanity was harmless. His species had been wrong. "Order, order," he shouted. "The human delegation has requested to speak. We will hear them." The hall fell silent as Doctor walked to the podium. She was 73 years old now, her hair completely white, her face lined with worry and exhaustion. She had not slept more than a few hours since the war began. She looked out at the assembled aliens, the scaled, the crystalline, the tentacled, the floating, all of them watching her with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "You want to know how we did it," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, like a grandmother telling a story to her children. "You want to understand how a species you called weak could defeat the hegemony, so I will tell you. I will tell you the truth about humanity." She pressed a button, and the holographic display came to life. But instead of military formations or weapon specifications, it showed something else. A photograph, an old photograph in black and white. It showed a city in ruins, buildings collapsed, streets filled with rubble, and in the center a single human figure, a woman sitting among the destruction holding a dead child. "This is a city called Hiroshima," Doctor said. "In the year 1945, our people destroyed it with a single weapon. 80,000 human beings died in one moment. 80,000 more died in the weeks that followed from wounds and radiation." The hall was absolutely silent. "We did this to ourselves," she continued. Humans killed humans, not for territory, not for resources, for ideas, for politics, for hate. She changed the image. More photographs, trenches filled with bodies, cities burning, mass graves. This is the First World War. 9 million soldiers died. 20 million more were wounded. This is the Second World War. 70 million dead. The most destructive conflict in our history. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. You looked at our memorials and saw weakness. You saw a species haunted by death, afraid of violence, desperate for peace. And you were right. We are all of these things. She turned to face the delegates directly. But you made an error in interpretation. The display changed again. This time it showed military academies, war colleges, strategy centers, archives filled with thousands of years of military history. We do not memorialize our dead because we lost our wars. We memorialize them because we won, and the cost was so terrible that we swore to never forget it. She changed the image to show anti-war protests, peace rallies, monuments dedicated to nonviolence. We do not teach our children that war is horror because we fear it. We teach them because we know it intimately. We have lived it. We have breathed it. We have swum in oceans of blood that we spilled with our own hands. Her voice grew harder, colder. We dream of peace not because we are naive. We dream of peace because we have seen the alternative. We have seen what we become when we stop dreaming of peace. We have seen the darkness inside ourselves. She pressed another button. The display showed diagrams, weapon designs, technologies that had been developed but never used. These are weapons we invented and then chose not to build. Biological agents that could kill entire planets, nanomachines that could devour civilizations, artificial intelligences designed for nothing but destruction. We had the knowledge to create hell itself, and we chose not to. Ambassador leaned forward, his translator struggling to process words that his language had no equivalent for. Why? If you had such weapons, why not use them? Doctor looked at him with something that might have been pity. Because we are not monsters, she said. Not anymore, not if we can help it. She straightened her shoulders, and suddenly she did not look like a tired old woman. She looked like something ancient and dangerous, like a sleeping volcano that had just opened one eye. You thought our anti-war culture was evidence of a broken spirit. No, it is evidence that we fight every single day to remain civilized. Every memorial we build, every peace treaty we sign, every time we choose words instead of weapons, these are victories. Hard-fought victories against our own nature. She turned off the display and spoke directly to the assembled species. Your ancestors evolved as prey or as solitary predators, or as hive minds that never knew internal conflict. You achieved peace naturally. You do not understand war because you never truly experienced it. But humanity, we are reformed predators. We are recovered addicts. We spent 10,000 years at war with ourselves before we finally, painfully, learned to stop. We know war like a former drunk knows alcohol, intimately, dangerously, eternally. She let that statement hang in the air. The thought they were attacking sheep. They were attacking wolves who had chosen to become vegetarians. They were attacking the most dangerous species in the galaxy, dangerous not because of our weapons, but because of our restraint. We chose peace. We chose it every day, against every instinct, against every dark voice in our heads telling us to fight and kill and conquer. We chose peace because we knew what would happen if we did not. Doctor walked to the edge of the podium, her eyes sweeping across the silent delegates. Now they have forced us to remember. They have forced us to pick up the weapons we put down. They have forced us to unleash the very thing we spent 3 centuries trying to cage. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow everyone in the hall could hear her perfectly. They believe they are at war with humanity. They are mistaken. They are at war with what humanity was trying so hard not to be. They are at war with our past, with our darkness, with the monster we locked in the basement and prayed would never escape. She paused. They should have let us keep dreaming of peace. There was a long moment of absolute silence. Then Ambassador spoke, his voice shaking. What happens now? Doctor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of someone who had already seen the future and did not like it. Now they learn why we dread conflict. Now they understand why we built all those memorials. Now they discover that we did not fear war because we are weak. She turned and began walking away from the podium. We feared war because we are strong, and we know what our strength can do. She stopped at the door and looked back one final time. We tried to warn them, we tried to warn everyone, but no one listened. Then she was gone, leaving the Galactic Conquered to contemplate the true nature of humanity. And far across the galaxy, Supreme Commander Thrax was gathering every ship his empire possessed. He was coming back with a force 10 times larger than before. He still did not understand. But he would learn. Humans Dread Conflict, Part 5. Supreme Commander Thrax had assembled the largest fleet in the history of the hegemony. 10,000 warships, millions of soldiers, every weapon his empire could produce. He would not make the same mistake twice. We will burn their worlds, he declared to his war council. We will destroy everything they have built. We will show them what happens when prey animals challenge predators. His officers roared their approval. They had tasted defeat at 442. They hungered for revenge. But Thrax did not know that humanity had already made its decision. In the chambers of the United Terran government, the debate had been fierce. Some leaders wanted a defensive war, hold the line, protect human space, wait for them to exhaust themselves. Others wanted something more. General stood before the assembly, his face grim. If we wait for them to come to us, millions of our people will die. Our colonies will burn. Our children will grow up in bunkers, hiding from enemies who will never stop attacking. He pulled up a star map showing space. But if we take the fight to them, if we strike at their military infrastructure, their shipyards, their command centers, we can end this war in months instead of decades. At what cost? Doctor asked quietly. General looked at her with old, tired eyes. Less than you might think. They have never fought a defensive war. Their society is built on conquest, not protection. If we hit them hard enough, fast enough, they will break. And they're civilians. We do not target civilians. We do not destroy their cities. We do not kill their children. His voice was firm. We are not monsters. We will win this war without becoming the very thing we fight against. Doctor studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Then we fight. The human fleet launched its counteroffensive 3 weeks later. They did not come as conquerors. They came as surgeons, cutting out the tumor of military power with precise, devastating strikes. Shipyards were destroyed. Military bases were reduced to rubble. Communication networks were disrupted. But the civilian populations were left untouched. Human soldiers landed on colony worlds and secured military targets while carefully avoiding any harm to noncombatants. When frightened families emerged from their homes, expecting to be slaughtered, they found human troops offering food and medical care instead. They did not understand. This was not how war worked. Victors destroyed the defeated. It had always been so. But humans were not like other species. Supreme Commander Thrax watched his empire crumble from the bridge of his flagship. His great fleet had been scattered across a dozen systems, unable to concentrate against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. How are they doing this? He demanded. How are they moving so fast? Admiral Vex had no answer. The humans fought like nothing in experience. They used tactics that seemed suicidal, then revealed themselves as brilliant strategic moves. They coordinated across vast distances as if they could read each other's minds. They adapted to every countermove before it was even completed. And they never stopped, never rested, never gave them a moment to recover. 3 months after the human counteroffensive began, Thrax found himself with only a handful of ships remaining. His was surrounded. His armies had surrendered or been destroyed. Everything he had built, everything his ancestors had conquered was gone. A human fleet hung in orbit above his planet, weapons armed and ready. Thrax waited for the bombardment. He waited for the nuclear fire that would burn his world to ash, just as he had planned to do to human worlds. It was what he deserved. It was what he would have done. But the bombardment never came. Instead, he received a message. A human admiral wanted to meet. Thrax went to the meeting expecting to negotiate his surrender. He expected humiliation, imprisonment, perhaps execution. Instead, he found a human woman waiting for him in a simple room on a neutral station. Her name was Admiral Sarah. She was the granddaughter of General who had given the order to awaken humanity's war machine. Her grandfather had died 6 weeks earlier, his heart giving out from the stress of commanding the war he had hoped would never come. "Supreme Commander," she said, gesturing to a chair, "please sit." Thrax sat. He did not know what else to do. "Your fleet is destroyed," Admiral said calmly. "Your military is broken. We have complete superiority over your space. I could order you destroyed with a single command." Thrax said nothing. He knew all of this. "But I am not going to do that." He looked up, confused. "Why not? It is what I would have done to you." "I know," Admiral said, "and that is exactly why we will not do it to you." She leaned forward, her eyes meeting his. "We are not trying to destroy your people, Supreme Commander. We are trying to teach you. We dreaded this conflict not because we feared losing, but because we knew we would win. And we knew what winning would cost, not just in lives, but in the kind of species we would become." Thrax struggled to understand. "You could kill us all, you choose not to. Why?" "Because we have been where you are. Hundreds of years ago, humanity was an empire of conquerors. We believed might made right. We believed the strong should rule the weak. We believed exactly what you believe." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "And then we nearly destroyed ourselves. We came so close to extinction that we had to change or die. We chose to change. It was the hardest thing our species ever did." She turned back to face him. "Now you have the same choice. Peace or annihilation. We desperately, genuinely want you to choose peace. We do not want to destroy you. We do not want to kill your children or burn your cities or erase your culture." Her voice hardened. "But we will if we must. Do not mistake our mercy for weakness. Do not think that because we offer peace, we cannot deliver war. We have shown you what we are capable of. We have shown you only a fraction of what we are capable of. This is humanity's offer. Accept peace. Join the community of civilized species. Learn what we learned, become what we became. Or refuse, and discover what happens when humans stop choosing peace." Thrax sat in silence for a long time. His whole life he had believed that strength meant domination, that power meant conquest, that victory meant destruction. The humans had shown him another way, a harder way, a way that required more strength than simple violence. "How do I know you will keep your word?" he finally asked. Admiral smiled. It was a sad smile, the smile of someone who had seen too much death. "You do not know. You will have to trust us, just as we will have to trust you." She extended her hand, a human gesture of peace. "Choose, Supreme Commander. The galaxy is watching." Thrax looked at her hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and took it. 10 years later, the Republic was a member of the Galactic Concord. Ambassador, older now and much wiser, wrote a new intelligence assessment of humanity. This one was accurate. "Humans do dread conflict," he wrote. This was never a lie, but their dread is not weakness. It is wisdom. They dread war the way a reformed killer dreads violence, with the intimate knowledge of one who knows exactly how good it feels and exactly how much it costs. They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of their weapons but because of their restraint. They have looked into the abyss of their own nature and they chose to step back. Every single day, they choose to step back. Do not mistake this choice for inability. Do not mistake their mercy for weakness. And above all, do not make them stop choosing. The galaxy is not ready for what happens if humans stop choosing peace. On Earth, Doctor visited the memorial, the monument to the fallen. She was 83 years old now, walking with a cane, her body failing but her mind still sharp. She placed flowers at the base of the monument and watched the children playing in the gardens nearby. They were laughing, running, enjoying a sunny day. They had never known war. They had never had to fight. That was the whole point. That had always been the whole point. Maybe, she whispered to the names carved in stone, maybe their children will never have to learn what we know. Maybe their children will live their whole lives without ever picking up a weapon. She turned and walked away, leaving the monument standing guard over its precious cargo of names, a reminder of humanity's greatest curse and greatest gift, the capacity for terrible violence, and the daily, desperate, beautiful choice not to use it. Above her, the stars shone down, the same stars that humans had reached with ships of war, then chosen to explore with ships of peace. The same stars that had watched humanity nearly destroy itself, then watched it rise again. The same stars that now knew the truth. Humans dread conflict. And that is exactly what makes them so terrifying.